Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm Bobby Harrison, your host today, and I'm joined by my colleagues and top-notch political reporters for our organization, Taylor Vance and Michael Goldberg. Taylor, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Bobby.
Michael, how you doing?
I'm good, Bobby. Thank you. That's a generous introduction.
Yeah, better than we deserve.
Well, we're here today. We all got together because we're going to ask questions. We're going to interrogate him. Former State Representative Cecil Brown. Representative Brown, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Chairman Brown, as I call him, served in the State House, I think, from 2000 to 2016. Is that
Correct.
Close? And before then, while he was in the House, this is why we're having him on today, really, is because he was the chair of the Education Committee and was one of the House's top budget writers, negotiators. And before then, he was executive director, not immediately before then, but earlier in his career, he was executive director of the Department of Finance and Administration. That job comes to the title of State Fiscal Officer. And then after that, he was a Public Service Commissioner representing the Central District on the Mississippi Public Service Commission. And now, it was he took an unusual move. He moved from Jackson to Oxford. Nobody's moving to Oxford, but he decided to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm now going to play pro football. I'm trying to get a second career here.
Well, I tell you what, that resume I just read took half the show, so we don't know you did.
I like that NIL stuff, but they won't give me anything.
Well, look, we wanted to we were talking. We wanted to have you on because, as you know, as probably our listeners know, the 2025 session ended without a budget. The legislature really has one task that the Constitution calls for them to do every year, and that was to pass a budget. And they weren't able to do that. Now, you were served in a time where it was hard to pass a budget. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to pass a budget for a lot of years for a lot of reasons. You got to realize there are 174 members in the legislature, and every one of them thinks they're smarter than everybody else, including me. So they've all got opinions. The budget, government moves on the budget. It doesn't move without the budget. They can't spend any money. They can't do anything. So it's very important to the way government operates that you have a budget every year. And there's never enough money, and there are always more needs than there is money available. So it's a pretty intense kind of thing. And it usually only is put together at the end of the session because the budget process begins in the summer before the session, and it sort of moves all the way through. The session, by the way, is 90 days typically. 1 year, in one session, it's 125 days, but it's generally 90 days, and it moves pretty fast. So you got a budget that's got to be adopted by March 31st generally. And the budget year starts July the 1st. So you got a short period of time to get it done. And so there's a lot of moving parts. A lot of people get involved in it. A lot of lobbyists in there wanting to plead their case for their clients. So there's a lot going on, and it's just hard to get it done. Just the mechanics of getting the budget done can be complicated. There are a lot of committees have to be involved, speaker, lieutenant governor, all the various interests in the budget. So it's just hard to get it done.
Well, it was during your tenure, it was really difficult in the sense that you had a Democratic-controlled House, which you served in, and then you had a Republican-controlled Senate, and closely allied with a Republican governor, Haley Barbour. There was years where this year, it doesn't really appear they're fighting over how much money to spend. It's just they're
just fighting.
They're just fighting. It's like one side did the other side wrong, so they won't negotiate. But y'all were really fighting over how the nuances, not nuances, but the level of funding, the dollar amount. And there was years where it was really close about whether y'all were going to have a budget because, y'all were really at loggerheads.
Well, we were, and it was complicated. We had Hurricane Katrina complicated everything. And then the great fiscal crisis complicated everything. We had a lot of federal money coming into the state, but we didn't have much state money. The state budget state revenues were way down. They were way below the estimates. And so we didn't have a lot of money for state government. Most of the money in state government, the largest part of it is spent on public education, universities and colleges, and K through 12, Medicaid, Department of Health, Department of Transportation. the big agencies, and there's just not much left for the other agencies to fight over. And fight they do. They've got lobbyists and they've got constituent groups who are very interested in seeing that they're funded so that their services can be provided to their constituents. So there's a lot of pressure on a few people. The budget generally is decided by 6 people plus the governor, 6 members of the House and Senate, and the governor. They're the ones that wind up doing all the work at the end. And so it can get pretty intense. If they can't agree, you're not going to have a budget. And that's what's happened more than once.
Oh, well, Cecil, I mean, as evidenced by your wide-ranging resume, you've had such an expansive view of state government for many years. So I think the general consensus is, despite the infighting at the moment, lawmakers will reach an agreement and pass a budget before the next fiscal year. But give us a sense of what a government shutdown would actually mean for the state. You know, public employees not getting paid, agencies potentially shutting down. Just what would that actually mean in practice?
Well, it depends on, as Bobby Harris and I were talking earlier in the day, and we had an Attorney General's opinion when I was there about what would happen. Would state government continue to operate? And his opinion was that, and remember, his opinions are just opinions. They're not the law itself, but it's a pretty informed opinion, that some agencies would be able to continue to operate because the Constitution requires them to operate, such as education, and so there would be money for education. But other agencies would just have to shut down. I mean, people just, like what's happened when the federal government has not had a budget, where some agencies have operated because they're required to operate, and others would just shut down. People would go home and wait for a budget. I don't think that's going to happen. It could happen. This seems to be a personality clash more than anything else. I don't know that it's a political clash. Of course, you've always got people who have higher ambitions, who may be involved and are trying to make their point for one reason or another. I don't know. I'm not on the inside with the Republican Party, so I don't know what's going on. But it sounds like it's more ego, and I don't mean that in a bad way, more personal ambition or personal positions than it is a real major conflict, as Bobby said, over the money.
Yeah. Cecil, this may seem like a silly question, but you know, you said there's some personality clashes right now. So based off of your experience, how do you resolve an impasse when you have a speaker, a lieutenant governor, maybe a governor, or House and Senate conferees that are at odds over something? How do you when you were in the legislature, how did you work through that?
We just worked through it, sat down with them eventually, and there was a lot of pressure. As I said, a lot of pressure, and they were getting a lot of phone calls and things. We've got to have a budget. We've got to have a budget. Nobody wants the government to shut down. Nobody wants to shut down state agencies. Nobody wants to have people laid off of their jobs. As a political matter, that's a disaster. So you don't want that to happen. And sooner or later, the lieutenant governor and his staff and the speaker and his staff will have to get together and decide on, somebody's going to have to give up some of what they want, and the other side will have to give up what they want, and they'll reach an agreement. It's going to happen that way. When it will happen, I don't know. But doing a special session is not the best way to resolve it, because what happens in a special session is the governor has a lot of control over the special session. The legislature in a special session, the only things that the legislature can consider are the things that the governor asks them to consider. So the governor can tell them, I want you to consider X, Y, and Z first. And if you do that, I'll give you the appropriations bills in order to complete the budget. And it sounds like, from what little bit I read about it, that's what he's going to do. He's going to tell them there are things that I want, and you're going to give me the things I want before you get the budget bills in front of you. They can't do that until he includes that in the special session.
I was telling Taylor this story the other day. I forget the year, but one year y'all were having an impasse on some parts of the budget, and it looked like, and the Senate was saying, unless you take our side, we're going to go into special session. And Governor Barber, who is on our side, is going to have the power, which is what you were just alluding to. And y'all sent a rule suspension resolution down late on the signing day, the final day of the regularly scheduled final day of the session. And the Senate didn't take it up, so y'all were preparing. I mean, y'all were there at like midnight. Y'all were preparing to adjourn, and then like at 11:45, the Senate Appropriations Chair, Jack Gordon at the time, said, let's give him one more chance. So he hurriedly passed the resolution, and it was run back down the hall to y'all, but y'all didn't have time to do anything with it. It was, I think he amended it. And I remember Speaker McCoy being so mad at that. Do you remember that at all? Or
I remember some of that. I don't remember all the details. The battle was over the funding for education. The House wanted, and Medicaid, and the House wanted more money allocated to those two budgets, and the Senate was doing what Haley Barbour wanted them to do, which was not put more money into it. And we just bowed up and said, we're not going to accept that. And you guys, if we have to go home, we'll just go home. And that's how that happened.
Yeah, and also during that time, y'all were fighting about how to pay for Medicaid too. He wanted to. I think he wanted to Governor Barbour wanted to put another additional tax on the hospitals. That
he did. In fact, Governor Barbour always bragged that he never raised taxes. That is not true. He raised taxes, and those taxes are still there on every hospital bed, every nursing home bed. There's an additional tax that Haley Barbour put on those beds supposedly to help fund Medicaid. And in all honesty, he lied about it. I mean, and I'll tell him he lied about it. He said that we would get more Medicaid money if we used that money from those hospital beds if we did it that way. That's not the way Medicaid works. And so he was just lying about it, and he didn't want to raise taxes. I mean, he wanted to raise taxes, and we didn't want to do it.
Cecil, I have, as a former education chairman, education is one of the subjects that's been floated as a potential topic in a special session, school choice being the primary issue that the governor, the speaker have been in favor of passing. The governor said, there are a host of conservative priorities that never made it to my desk this session, including school choice. So what do you think about the prospect of, there aren't the votes to pass school choice in the House during the sort of regular session? How would the calculus change during a sort of contracted special session with the prospect of a government shutdown looming? I mean, from a political standpoint, from a policy standpoint, how does that change the kind of process for debating and potentially passing a policy like school choice?
Well, it's a hot issue, and I don't think school choice and using private schools is going to pass in a special session, in any special session. Using state dollars to pay for private schools is not going to pass the legislature. Now, I realize there was a bill that there was, I guess, a Supreme Court opinion about letting them use some money that went through the Department of Finance Administration and let them use some money for construction. But as a general matter of funding private schools, in the first place, the Constitution prohibits it. So you can't do that. The Constitution is clear. You'd have to amend the Constitution because it's clear that public education money that comes from taxes, local taxes, has to go, and state taxes has to go to public schools. So I don't think that's going to pass. Charter schools are a different issue. They continue to give more money to charter schools. I actually authored charter school bills when I was chairman, and we actually passed a bill called Parent Trigger School that I authored that would allow parents to take over a school. And I thought it was a good bill. Since we did that, several other states have adopted that policy. I was looking at it yesterday. I think now there's 7 or 8 states that have a parent trigger bill that allows parents to take over a failing school. So there are a lot of ways to do it without spending public funds on a private school, and I just don't think that's going to happen. It could gum up the whole situation. I don't know. It depends on how hard Tate wants to fight about that.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe you could give us a little bit of historical perspective on the budget process and sort of how it's changed over the years. Now, since I've been covering the legislature, during the off season, there is about a day, maybe 2 days of budget hearings. Now there is almost, it's honestly news when there is an open public conference committee instead of, I think in the past when there were more, open conference committee meetings. So I'm just wondering, maybe, just feel free to speak about other factors, but how, maybe from your perspective, has the budget process changed over the years? So just when you were in the legislature, when you were involved as now?
When I was state fiscal officer, the budget hearings were about a month long. Bobby, I think that's right, about a month. They were long, and any agency that wanted to have a hearing could get a hearing. And they could
just for the record, the hearings before the budget committee, which consists of the speaker, the lieutenant governor, and legislative leaders.
That's correct. And they would ask agencies would submit a budget request, written request. Then they would come before the budget committee and just try to justify what they were asking for. If there was a new plan, a new program, they would ask for additional money. If they wanted to delete a program, they'd say why they were doing that, and they'd answer a lot of questions. It was very valuable. When I got on the committee, we were doing 2 weeks, I think is what it was. It was down from a month to 2 weeks. Unfortunately, when Philip Gunn took over, he got it down to 2 days, and they don't really have a hearing, as I understand it. They just, and Bobby, I don't know if you've been to those 2-day meetings or not, but there's not much to them, and they pick who they want. They don't not just anybody can have a hearing. So that's the way I understand it. But even more, and that's a real loss, because the staff, the budget commission staff, the legislative budget office, analyzes all those budget requests and makes recommendations to the budget committee about what should be done. That's very helpful, because the budget committee, there are 100 and some odd different appropriations bills. The budget committee can't do all that by themselves. They've got to have the staff to do it, and they need to hear from the staff. They're not going to sit down and read 130 appropriations bills, so they need to hear from the staff. And that's when they do it, is when they have these meetings. You can't do all that in 2 days. But the reason they changed it is because it puts a tighter grip on the budget process in the hands of a very few people. At the same time they did that, they changed the rules in the House so that basically now you can't, the typical member cannot amend an appropriation bill on the floor. It just doesn't happen. They changed the rule. It used to be that when I was there, and for, I guess, decades before that, if a member wanted to amend an appropriation bill to ask for more money for the Department of Wildlife, for example, they could offer an amendment to the wildlife appropriation bills. It would be debated, and then it would either pass or fail. But now to do that, they got to say where they're going to take the money from. So if you want to add money to wildlife, you got to take it from somewhere else. Well, that doesn't work. It's just not feasible to do that. So basically, they've shut the typical members out of the budget process. But not only that, the budget, the appropriations bill, and the Ways and Means bill, which is the offsetting bill that does revenue, it used to be made up of members who were selected by the speaker, and they had members that were placed on those committees based on seniority because they were assumed to be more experienced in the process. Well, when Philip Gunn came on, he stacked the bills. He just added more speaker appropriations to the bills, which gave him much more control over what went on the bills. So anyway, at the same time, they just basically closed down the appropriations process. And as I understand it, I was not there, but as I understand it, what they did is the Republican caucus would meet separately and vote on the appropriations bills. And then they would all agree that they would support, they had the majority, so they would support the appropriations bill, take it to the floor. There would be no debate on the bills on the floor, no attempt to amend them. So they just completely shut the Democrats out. So that's the way I understand the way it happens now. Bobby, I guess it's still happening that way. I don't know.
Yeah, you and I think a point Taylor was making, when there are negotiations, they're done and always behind closed doors. Which y'all, in fairness, y'all often met behind closed doors, but y'all met in those conference negotiations a lot of times in open session. Now, I remember a lot of times the open session was sitting in Jack Gordon's office and hearing Johnny, Senate Appropriation Chair Jack Gordon and your leader Johnny Stringer, Johnny Stringer talk about their cars because they were loggerheads on the budget. They didn't have anything to say, so they both had a extensive collection of cars, so they'd talk about those.
Many long nights talking about other things other than the budget. The other thing that's happening is all the budgets were submitted to a subcommittee, and the subcommittee in the appropriations process. I don't know whether they still do that or not. I don't think they do, but they were submitted to a subcommittee. Subcommittee chairperson would meet with somebody representing the agency to go over the details of it. The subcommittee would vote on it, then it would come to the full appropriations committee. And then the full appropriations committee in open session would vote on the appropriations bills, and there could be debate in the appropriations committee. And in fact, there was a lot of debate in the appropriations committee. Sometimes amendments were offered, not often, but sometimes. The process, the closed part of the process is when we get down to the final part of the budget process. And under the rules, the full appropriations committee can't meet with very few exceptions, can't meet in closed session. So they can't vote on that. What happened in practice, and if it goes to a conference committee, 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate, they can't meet and decide in closed session. What typically happens is the chairman of that conference committee on both sides would meet and talk about it and try to resolve it between the two of them in private session. That would not be in a public session. It would just be the two of them. As a practical matter, that seemed to work pretty well because in the end, there's a lot of running up and down the hall. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. It would take another several days to try to resolve it if every time that conference committee met or there was any decision to be made, it was an open session. Now, I'm not going to try to justify closed sessions, but I will tell you as a practical matter, opening those conferences, it's not so much a question of trying to hide things. It's a question of getting the work done because you're under a gun to get it done.
Cecil, the speaker has said in passing, and I'm paraphrasing him here, that the American people this past November voted for more fiscal austerity, or maybe he would put it differently, more sort of responsible stewarding of public funds. There's talk of creating a Mississippi Office of Government Efficiency, modeled after what Elon Musk is doing at the federal level. When you were involved in the budget process, how much did the sort of national mood and the national economic environment kind of creep into the calculus over the budget process here in Mississippi?
Well, the national budget did because we always needed to know what was happening with federal funds. But in terms of politics, there was not a lot of that. The American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a conservative group of legislators from across the country, representing very conservative positions, would meet. They still meet and come up with what they call model legislation, which they try to get adopted by as many states as possible. And so that was the biggest part of what we heard from the national side. But let me say this about cut. The Republicans have cut close to 10,000 state employees over time, not all at one time, but they reduced the size of the state workforce by close to 10,000 people. A lot of those people were pretty critical people. I mean, they weren't just all sitting around twiddling their thumbs. They had jobs to do, and they were doing those jobs. And so you go to the Department of Health, they don't have the staff they need. They just don't. You look at the highway, what do you call it, reception areas on the highways, they're closed. We went through a period of time where we didn't have enough people to man the driver's license stations. We're not spending enough money on state government to do the things that need to be done. Now, I'm not saying we ought to do everything everybody wants, but there are a lot of things that the typical Mississippian wants and needs that are not being funded now. And they do it in the name of fiscal efficiency. And by the way, this would not be something new. There have been efficiency studies in Mississippi state government. I don't know how many over the years, but I know when several of the state auditors have done that and made these attempts to make recommendations about efficiency moves. A lot of people have done that, and it's just when Ray Mabus was elected governor, my former business partner, Tommy Tan, chaired a committee that went in and talked about consolidation of state agencies in the name of efficiency, and they consolidated some. The legislature came in. They didn't do them all, but they did some. So this is not new. I certainly don't have any concern about them doing this. I just don't think you're going to see a whole lot of benefit from it. Now, I will say that when I was in the legislature, I authored a bill to set up internal auditors in all of the major state agencies, not the Board of Barbers, but a lot of state agencies. And we still haven't done that. That's what I think we ought to be doing in the name of efficiency. Internal audit, now these are not the kind of internal auditors we have here in Mississippi, but professional internal auditors. I got the idea from the state of Florida and the state of Texas and modeled the legislature on Florida and Texas. The legislation is still on the books, but it's never been funded by the legislature.
One or the issue that sort of dominated the regular session was tax cuts. There was legislation that passed to eliminate the income tax, raise the gasoline tax slightly, modify PERS, and some other things. I believe you're a big, huge supporter of that piece of legislation. I'm just curious of what your opinion is as someone who has been involved in the budget and funding state government, and just what do you think the ramifications of that piece of legislation will be?
Well, first, let me say that I'm not a big tax and spend person. I authored legislation to cut the grocery tax during the time that I was there, and it never passed.
Came close.
Yeah. This legislation that was passed and signed by the governor is a disaster. Just the first year, and you got to run the numbers. You got to think. I'm a numbers person. I'm a former CPA, and I understand a lot about numbers. And so I've done that. I run all the numbers and look at just phasing in the first 5 years. This bill goes from 4% income tax. The income tax used to be 3%, 4%, and 5% based on your income, and then drop the 5% off, and now we're a flat 4%. They want to reduce it. They will reduce it because it's already passed from 4% to 3% over a period of 5 years. The first year alone, that's going to cost state government in terms of revenue $300 million. $300 million. The next year, it's going to cost $270 million. The number changes depending on the size of the income. But over a period, if you took income tax represents 30% of the total revenue for the state of Mississippi. And they're saying in 5 years, they want to eliminate 30% of the total state revenue. They never talk about what they're going to do to pay for that. Where are they going to, number one, where are they going to get the money to replace that? And if they're not going to replace it, what are they going to do to cut it? I've already mentioned that most of the state budget is spent on education or Medicaid or a few other vital parts of state budget. Where are they going to cut the budget $300 million? Or in fact, the total amount of income tax currently collected is $2.1 million. How are they going to, $2.1 billion. How are they going to replace $2.1 billion in a $7 billion budget? How are they going to do that? Are they going to cut $2.1 billion out of the budget? What are they going to cut? There's been literally no discussion about that. They said they're going to do it by growth. If you did it over 10 years, it would take an additional 4.5% of growth in all the other areas of income to get to balance the budget over a period of 10 years. That's not including the money that you have to continue to fund what you're already doing. That's just not going to happen. You're not going to have an 8% annual growth rate in the revenues in the state of Mississippi. It's just not going to happen. So, what they've done is something that just can't be done. And the state of Kansas worked themselves into a disaster by doing this, and they wound up having to undo this. But in the meantime, a lot of people got hurt. That's what I'm concerned about.
And people compare us to Kansas, but even the Kansas model didn't completely eliminate the income tax.
Yeah, I mean, this is just forgetting the equity of it. Right now, a substantial number in Mississippi don't even pay income tax. Retirees who don't get any income but retirement income don't pay any state income tax under the state law. Something like 20% of all people, low income type people, don't pay any state income tax. I mean, if you make $20,000 a year and you're married to 4 kids, you don't pay any state income tax. So it's not going to benefit the low income people. It's only going to benefit people on the upper end. And that's what they're trying to do. That's what they're doing at the federal level. We know that. So it's not, it's not equitable. It's not smart. I don't know why they did it. Jason's a whole lot smarter than that. Dilbert's a whole lot smarter than that. I don't understand what they're doing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we appreciate your time. I know you're busy enjoying your retirement.
I am.
But we appreciate you taking time out to come on our podcast, and maybe we'll do it again sometimes.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah,
Nice
thank
to
you.
see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.